My friends, I have passed the 125,000 subscriber mark. I want to thank all of you for subscribing. I want to ask you please to check to make sure that you are still subscribed because I do not wish to lose subscribers now. It does happen every day, believe me, my friends. I'm telling you the truth. And I'm going to have a 125,000 subscriber celebration Friday at 6 o'clock p.m. Central, where we will be discussing in detail all about Rise of Skywalker. Thank you for subscribing, and onward to 150. I have just seen Rise of Skywalker, and I'm here to tell you that it is not only the best film in the Disney sequel trilogy, it is also the worst film in the Disney sequel trilogy. To say that it moves briskly would be an understatement as absurd as calling the crash of the Hindenburg a bratwurst roast. By way of analogy, when Disney bought Star Wars, it was a fully functional wagon with 4 wheels and a shiny paint job. With The Force Awakens, Jar Jar Abrams thought it would look better as a tricycle, so he yanked a wheel off and threw it away. Ruin Johnson came and said, "Screw you, Abrams, I'm gonna yank 2 wheels off and leave you with a damn unicycle. Suck on that, biatch." And now, with Rise of Skywalker, Jar Jar Abrams said to hell with it, yanked the last wheel off of the wagon, stuck a lampshade on it, and called it Dio. Another brilliant droid from the man who brought you a beach ball with a droid head stuck on it. That is essentially the evolution of the Disney sequel trilogy. The wheels were ripped off the wagon one by one, and now it's just a sled, skidding down the rubble of broken dreams and right off the cliff of no return into Canon Calamity Canyon. But Doomcock, you ask, the best of the sequel trilogy, you say? How can this be? And the worst at the same time? Yes, my friends, it was the best of times, it was the worst of times. Let's take a look at what was good about this movie before I take this damn thing apart, brick by brick. How is it the best? The acting here is actually pretty good. It saddens me to think of what these talented people could have done with a decent script. This is the only Disney sequel trilogy installment where I felt like these characters could have carried a movie on their own. The dynamics were there, but the scripts never were. There are some moments in Rise of Skywalker, and I'm talking brief moments, when it's amiable, and even manages little flashes of charm. I think it's the only one of the Disney movies that kind of works as a standalone movie divorced from Star Wars. Essentially, this is a Disney holiday popcorn movie for kids draped over a young adult romance novel. There were times when I imagined myself with a wife and kids watching the movie. I'm a normie in this scenario, and my kids are just excited to be out of school and to have a tree and presents in their near future, and it's largely genial. My teenage daughter is a Raylo, and she's happy with the whole good girl finding a bad boy and changing him into a good boy thing. I mean, 2 years ago she was into horses, now she's into a guy who looks like a horse. Fine, whatever. And on that non-critical, non-Star Wars fan level, I think it's a movie that could give that audience a relatively decent middle-of-the-road time, but only on the holidays, because the plot makes no sense. It's more like a video game than a movie, the characters are wafer thin, and as long as the action is quick and there's lens flares and you don't think, it's manageable. But it's also the worst of the 3 sequel movies, the worst by a mile, if you're a Star Wars fan. It's hard to overstate just how disastrous this film is in terms of Star Wars canon. I mean, if The Force Awakens and killing Han and having Luke run away to Ahch-To was a dropped bar of soap in the Star Wars prison shower, and The Last Jedi and turning Luke into a cowardly milk-sucking surrender monkey was the Spanish Inquisition of Star Wars, in a real sense, The Rise of Skywalker is the Thanos snap middle finger of F you to Star Wars fans, and George Lucas himself. As hard as it is to believe, The Rise of Skywalker is, in my opinion, worse than The Last Jedi in terms of taking a cognitive sledgehammer to everything that came before it. Consider, The Force Awakens was essentially a remake of the original Star Wars. I think writer-director Jar Jar Abrams thought that because he had simply swapped out a woman for Luke, a beach ball for R2-D2, Edgar Allan Poe for Han Solo, Kylo Ren for Darth Vader, Maskananda for Yoda, Finn for C-3PO, even though 3PO was kind of there but kind of not there. Abrams didn't need to develop these characters. They were bookmarks for the original characters. They served as analogs for stand-ins that should be so familiar to the audience, Abrams apparently thought he didn't have to actually put them through their paces. George Lucas already did that, after all, back in the original trilogy. And since Rey was a young Force sensitive on a desert planet just like Luke, who finds a beach ball-like droid just like R2 carrying an important secret the First Order is looking for, and the threat is a giant planet-sized weapon just like the Death Star, been there, done that, Abrams figured, it seems to me we can skip over the details and just get to the action. So we never actually see why Rey seems to immediately master the Force upon hearing about it, and her hero's journey isn't a journey so much as an instant download. Rey is the bestest ever, in keeping with an agenda of female empowerment. That's all that matters. And as a result of this narrative laziness, fans never really buy that she's all she's cracked up to be, never really accept her heroics as anything but plot armor and cheat codes in a Star Wars video game. This absurdly over-the-top empowerment is an insult to all the Jedi and Sith of the past, a shortcut to stolen glory that irks longtime fans, the result being the main character of the Star Wars saga is a Mary Sue that can do everything. And the problem with a character like that is they have nowhere else to go, no room to grow, and they render everyone else they encounter along the way moot, insignificant, and boring. Finn, Poe, Leia, Chewbacca, Han, who cares? Rey has it all covered, and when the main bad guy of the whole saga gets his ass handed to him by a girl who only just heard about the Force a few days ago, you know you've got problems. So that's the best part of The Force Awakens. And the worst part? How The Force Awakens treats the original characters. Luke Skywalker is not seen on screen until the very last shot, having mysteriously vanished and, equally mysteriously, left a convenient map in 2 parts for extra security because God forbid someone should solve the puzzle that he left for them to solve, not wanting them to solve it. So the person we most wanted to see, we don't get to see, and even worse, fans get cheated out of seeing Luke, Han, and Leia together again on the big screen because after turning Han into a deadbeat dad that ran out on his family and forgot where he parked the Falcon for 30 fucking years, Abrams kills Han in the stupidest way possible by basically having him walk onto a lightsaber wielded by his maniac son. So Luke has run away, Han is a deadbeat dad who dies, and Leia is basically furniture. None of the original characters is treated with respect, dignity, or affection. Abrams is much more interested in his new characters, and perhaps sensing that these placeholder characters paled in comparison to the original characters, Abrams made sure to minimize, humiliate, and or kill all of them, clearing the way for the amazing Wonder Rey and her pals to seize control of the narrative. That was bad. Then The Last Jedi took all the flaws of The Force Awakens and made them oh so much worse. Luke, it turns out, was not merely AWOL, he was actively a coward who got his ass kicked by his new student after he clumsily and against every established character trait from the original trilogy tried to murder Ben Solo in his sleep, then run away, ignoring the real and growing threat of the First Order. This was nothing less than a calculated character assassination of Luke Skywalker, degrading him in every possible way as he refused to train Rey, refused to assist the Resistance in any meaningful way until the very end, when he kind of phoned in some phony help as a Force illusion and then died. They took Luke's optimism and killed it, turning him into a bitter cynic. They took Luke's loyalty to family and trashed that, turning a man who risked his life to redeem his evil father into a sneak who almost killed his own nephew in his sleep for suspected dark side tendencies, and then that nephew kicked his ass, thus degrading Luke Skywalker's skill. This was such a horrible transgression, such a no turning back moment of ultimate nihilism that those who had been longtime Star Wars fans knew there was no coming back from this. This was the end of Star Wars. So what else was left to damage? What could the third movie possibly do that was worse? Hold my expensive Galaxy's Edge beer, says Rise of Skywalker. The most stunning thing about the final episode in the so-called Skywalker saga is how relentlessly it destroys pretty much everything about the original trilogy. So let's start with how this movie handles Luke. Yes, Luke is always at the heart of canon destruction in the Disney sequel trilogy, and this film is no exception to that rule. At one point in the story, Rey retreats to Milk-Suck Island because she has sensed the dark side of herself stirring and wants to run away from it, like Luke did. She lights the TIE fighter she arrived in on fire and then tosses Luke's lightsaber into the flames. Suddenly, Luke's Force ghost appears and catches the lightsaber, plucks it right out of the air. Rey tells Luke she wants to withdraw from the world just like he did, and Luke tells her, "I was wrong," with a little grin, throwing shade at Ruin Johnson in a bit that actually made me smile. In this scene, Luke seems like himself, more or less, and it was sad. You caught a glimpse of the patient and wise Jedi he could have been, he should have been, with a better script. I honestly think that if Abrams had written and directed the second script, if Kathleen Kennedy hadn't screwed up the works, firing Trevorrow, who I believe would have worked with Abrams' outline, we would not be in this mess today. The weird thing about Rise of Skywalker is it is frenetic, even frantic. Abrams has a penchant for hyperactive narratives. Narrative chaos is his equivalent of lens flares. He likes to keep things moving so quickly you can't spot the holes in the story, in the same way that lens flares tend to obscure parts of the frame and add a kinetic quality to the proceedings that otherwise isn't really there. It's a trick, a cheat if you will. But all that said, I caught glimpses throughout this movie of what the Disney sequel trilogy could have been, and it saddened me. For the first time, I saw that in actual fact, this is a good and talented cast. There are little sporadic moments in Rise of Skywalker that reveal that there was something special here that could have worked. I think Abrams' Episode 8 might well have developed things in an interesting way once he broke away from slavishly playing it safe and ripping off Episode 4, because there are a few scenes in this movie when the chasing and the lens flares and the mile-a-minute banter stops, and the actors are allowed the chance to breathe, to take a moment, and inhabit the roles rather than allow the roles to jerk them around like puppets. This is an excellent illustration of the split personality of Rise of Skywalker. It is the best and the worst of the Disney sequel trilogy movies. Throughout this movie, the Reylo courtship continues. They force Skype each other, they fight, they hang up, rinse and repeat. So as I said, after Rey almost succumbs to the dark side, runs Kylo through with her lightsaber in one of their spats, then heals him with yet another Force power she was never trained in and has no right to use, Rey returns to Ruin Island in the Johnson Sea on the Isthmus of Roundhead in the Tropic of Asshole Corn, the island where Jake Skywalker went and hid while the rest of the galaxy went to hell, and she's gonna run away like Luke did so that she won't turn to the dark side. And here's an example of why this movie is absolutely the worst of the three. When she hurls a lightsaber into the flaming wreckage of Kylo's TIE fighter, Luke catches it. Luke is a Force ghost, but he catches the lightsaber. And with that, Jar Jar Abrams not only ruins Star Wars entirely, but also insanely ruins the final act of his own movie. Because along with Yoda being able to use Force lightning to destroy the Jedi Temple on Ahch-To, now it's clear that Yoda's ability to exert power on the physical plane was not a fluke. Luke can also grab a lightsaber, and even worse, once he convinces Rey to not turn coward and run away like he did, Luke also uses the Force to raise his X-Wing fighter out of the ocean so that Rey can fly it to confront Palpatine. And that right there, ladies and gentlemen, is all she wrote. Yoda is powerful enough to shoot Force lightning, a dark side power, by the way, and Luke is powerful enough to levitate an X-Wing out of the water. Ruin Johnson And now Jar Jar Abrams is telling us that Force ghosts are powerful in the material world, which begs the question, why the hell don't the Force ghosts kill Palpatine? If Luke can hold a damn lightsaber, why doesn't he just materialize his ass over on Exegol and hold that lightsaber long enough to chop Palpatine's head off? And why doesn't Yoda go and help him, shooting lightning at Palpatine's head as it bounces? What, Luke can't ghost teleport a material object to Exegol along with himself? Why not? Rey can force teleport stuff and so can Kylo. But never mind. How about when Rey goes to Exegol and confronts Palpatine, she brings an extra lightsaber for Luke, who then materializes, along with Yoda zapping Palpatine, and Qui-Gon kicking him, and Obi-Wan waving his hand and saying, and I don't know, maybe Mace Windu comes along and crushes Palpatine with some rocks, and they all grab his undead ass and chuck his head and body parts over the conveniently placed cliff. But no, when the time to confront Palpatine comes, Rey and Kylo go it alone. And though all the Force ghosts cheer her on, in the end they're all surrender monkeys just like Luke, and they're aware of the situation on Exegol, and they don't do shit. And in one fell swoop, Abrams turns all the Force ghosts into cowards and traitors as bad as Luke. How could the Lucasfilm story group and Abrams and Kennedy and Iger not see that having Luke and Yoda's Force ghosts do these things completely alters Star Wars? Why the hell didn't Yoda and Obi-Wan go help out Luke against Vader and the Emperor in Return of the Jedi? Certainly, this alters the sequel trilogy and the outcome of Rise of Skywalker. The Force ghosts are incredibly powerful, and yet all of them essentially sit out the battle and let Rey handle it. Oh sure, it's implied that they lend her their power, but it's all shady and vague. It feels tacked on like a lot of this movie, and the ending makes no sense because horrible things happen over and over again, but it's always okay. That's the lesson here. Nothing that happens in Rise of Skywalker makes sense or has any impact at all. Rey damages Kylo's TIE fighter when he tries to run her over with it inexplicably. He crash lands in flames, then appears without a scratch. Kylo gets run clean through with a lightsaber, but Rey fixes him right up with Force healing. Chewie is killed in an explosion, but nah, he was on a different ship, he's fine, and they rescue him from the First Order like 15 minutes later. All the dead characters show up and have a nice visit. C-3PO gets lobotomized and it's a big deal farewell, but nah, he's fine after all, not very long after. Nothing happens of any real consequence throughout most of this movie. There is no real suspense. Nothing ever feels really in jeopardy. You don't have time to think, much less worry about anyone. Stuff just happens. There is no sense to it at all, and nothing really matters in the end. Death itself is completely phony in this movie. Death isn't a goodbye in Rise of Skywalker. It's a joke. So spoiler folks, Leia dies, and immediately we have a scene with Kylo talking to dead Han, who touches him, by the way, on the cheek. So you can say Han isn't a Force ghost, but he sure is dead, and he sure is talking and touching like a Force ghost, and if it walks like a duck and quacks like a duck and shits like a duck, Abrams has killed Star Wars. So yeah, Leia dies, immediately Kylo is talking to dead Han, Rey is talking to dead Luke, Carrie Fisher is dead for reals, and Palpatine is kind of undead. So in Star Wars 9, Weekend at Palpatine's, death is not an impediment to reunions, good conversation, and holiday family fun. These conversations with the dead, coming as they do right on the heels of Leia's death, really trivialize the death of Leia in the most clumsily insulting way imaginable. I mean, if it wasn't so laughably bungling, I'd be furious. As it was, I just rolled my eyes and shook my head and realized that this was not a competent narrative, and on this ship of suck, there is no one at the wheel. Throughout this movie, there's a ridiculous disregard for time and space, which is always the case with Abrams. For example, Rey and her pals go to a desert planet looking for a clue as to where Palpatine is. A big festival is going on there. Kylo Force Skypes Rey on the Burning Man planet, then rips a necklace right off of her neck. Because she got the necklace on the planet, the lab aboard the Star Destroyer analyzes it, figures out what planet it came from, doesn't radio Kylo on the bridge, but actually takes the time to take the various elevators it takes to get to the bridge, then crosses the enormous deck to report this to Kylo in person, that Rey is attending Burning Man. Think this would take a long time to actually make all this happen? You're damn right it would. So they report this to Kylo. Kylo says, aha, they're on planet Lilith Fair, let's go. And lo and behold, about 5 minutes later, the First Order invades planet Rave. This happens over and over and over again, and it's going to take some doing to remember every instance of this and a little analysis to understand just how insane Abrams' disregard for the logistics of space travel and coincidence really is. But here's another insane example. Kylo is over on Zori Bliss's planet looking for Rey when he Force Skypes Rey. Rey and the gang have infiltrated his main capital ship to rescue Chewie using a special pass that Zori Bliss gave him. Like everything in this movie, in the quest for the MacGuffin, everything Rey and Finn and Poe do is absurdly easy. So while Poe and Finn are cutting through a whole ship full of stormtrooper-shaped targets, Rey senses the Sith dagger she needs is aboard this flagship. So she uses the Force to track it down. Plus 15 Bloodhound of Sniffing bonus for being the bestest ever. It was an easy roll of the die for her to hit. And she winds up in Kylo's private apartment. There she finds the bullshit dagger that was used to murder her parents, the dagger that coincidentally has the code that will tell her where Palpatine is, although the Sith holocron also points the way to where Palpatine is, so I don't know why the fuck they actually... Look, they run around a lot, they shoot a bunch of shit, they go to point A, get a clue, Kylo shows up, they run away to point B, get a clue, Kylo shows up, they run away to point C and Kylo is already waiting for them, ha-ha! Just kidding. They go to point C and get a clue, and Kylo shows up to chase them. Rinse and repeat until they find Palpatine. But wait, so Rey is in Kylo's pad when Kylo Force Skypes her, and he's like, dude, you're in my place. And she's like, yeah, and I'm taking your shit. So they fight, and she fucks up his Vader shrine with the burned up Vader helmet, which, if it's metal, I don't see how a Viking pyre on the moon of Endor is actually gonna get hot enough to melt it and twist it like that, but whatever. So he's like, nuh-uh, oh no you didn't. So Kylo hangs up, and son of a bitch, before you know it, Kylo makes it from Zori Bliss's planet all the way back to his apartment ship before she can get away. And that's where, surrounded by stormtroopers aiming at her, and with Kylo there sparring with her again, she still manages to get away from him and his fleet in a scene that rips off the "No, I'm your father" scene from Empire. That's right, this scene is the Khan ripoff scene from Star Trek Into Darkness all over again. Kylo tells her, join me and together we will rule the galaxy, and reaches out his hand to her, and she says, I'll never join you, and hurls herself into the chasm of outer space, where she gets picked up by the Millennium Falcon, just like in Empire. I am not making this up. So still wondering if Rise of Skywalker is the worst of the Disney sequel trilogy movies? Keep listening. The whole movie is like this, people. As prophesied by Led Zeppelin, Kylo is a traveler of both time and space, and no wonder where Rey goes, Kylo will be popping up there within minutes of her arrival. In this way, Rise of Skywalker manages to be boring, numbing, nonsensical, and infuriating, all at the same time. And speaking of infuriating, let's talk about the Sith dagger for a moment. The Sith dagger is the most idiotic MacGuffin I've ever seen. Not only does it look like a hobbyist's resin kit or a really special +10 danger dagger of danger made by little Timmy at summer camp for use in his D&D campaigns. That's DM little Timmy to you, maggot. The thing is just the worst prop I think I've ever seen. And yet so useful too. Yeah, so this dagger not only has the location of Palpatine's wayfinder written in code on it. Why would you encode that on a dagger? But get this, gang. Rey is standing on the beach on Endor and looking over at the Death Star wreckage, and without much thought at all, she has an idea, and it works, and it's idiotic. She finds a hidden slide rule compass thingy in the hilt of the dagger. She lines up the weird lines of the dagger with the Death Star and the horizon, and voila! She knows where the Wayfinder is hidden. Yeah, that's right, guys. Never mind that to stumble on this little trick, you'd have to stand exactly in the right place on exactly the right outcropping on the beach, discover and use the silly decoder slide rule in the hilt, and line up the dagger with the outline of the Death Star wreckage to know, yep, it's over there, that-a-ways. Yeah, you could have that 1,000,000-to-1 shot realization standing in exactly the right place and use the dagger to point across the sea at the massive Death Star wreckage over there. Or you could just figure, hey, you know what? I bet that Emperor Palpatine's Wayfinder is over there in the wreckage of Emperor Palpatine's Death Star. Oh, you think? You think that their Death Star wreckage might be a good place to start looking, Tex? Good God almighty, how stupid is this crap? That wreckage must cover an area the size of several cities at least. And the dagger is saying, yep, it's over there that-a-way. Thanks, Dagger. You're a hell of a lot of help. That over there thing is real specific in wreckage the size of half of a moon. And why the hell didn't that massive object hitting Endor not completely destroy the ecosphere anyway? The collision of a falling object from orbit would have been a catastrophic planetary extinction event. And why did Palpatine survive it? They never explained that. Just as I predicted, when the alleged reactions to the explanations for Palpatine's return were badly received in the rumored test screenings, they figured they'd just cut any explanations and circumvent criticism for plot lines involving clones. It was a clone Darth Vader killed because Palpatine knew he would turn traitor, so he substituted a clone for himself and allowed his big expensive Death Star 2, the sequel, to be destroyed instead of just executing Vader. Yeah. Little shit like that doesn't go over real well, so they just completely ignore the issue. Palpatine is announced to be back out of the blue in the opening crawl, and that's all the explanation you're getting. Palpatine is back, and with that one stroke of idiocy, Jar Jar Abrams destroys the original trilogy. Vader's sacrifice is nullified because he died for nothing. Palpatine survived. So Vader's sacrifice is nullified because he died for nothing? The victory of the rebellion is transformed into a hollow farce, and Nub Nub ceases to be a nuanced exploration of the dynamics of the hero's journey and lapses back into what it always was, an Ewok song about fleas. Picking fleas out of your friend's fur on Life Day, to be specific. But I digress. The fact of the matter is, the most damning thing about Rise of Skywalker is that Abrams has the gall to reach back and alter the original trilogy, mutilating not only the future of Star Wars, but its past. Palpatine surviving being cast down into the reactor core, being blown up with the Death Star, getting fried entering the atmosphere of Endor, then the catastrophic crash onto the surface of Endor is a fucking abomination that strains not only credulity, but the victorious, glorious ending of Return of the Jedi. Abrams not only ruined the future of our heroes, turning them in every case into failures who betrayed their own ideals. With Rise of Skywalker, Abrams has reached into their past and robbed them of their greatest victory as well. In having Palpatine survive, he has robbed them and robbed all of us of our happy ending. The arrogance of this bastard cannot be overstated, and the simple act of bringing back Palpatine as the mastermind of all this mayhem throughout the entire series of 9 movies, Abrams has turned this whole rotten farce of a trilogy from the Skywalker saga into the Palpatine saga, and that I cannot forgive. Abrams doesn't even do it artfully. The entire Palpatine storyline is inconsistent gibberish. So you've got severely damaged undead Count Palpatine hanging from an action figure stand as Rey enters. He tells her that she will kill him, and then freed of his body, he will enter her, and then they together will rule the new empire. So she kills him, and he wins. Ta-da! Yeah, you heard me right. Palpatine wants her to kill him, so he can possess her and rule in her body. So she kills him. but he doesn't enter her body and rule. Puzzled? Yeah, well, it makes no sense. No sense at all. He wants her to kill him, and she kills him, and he's defeated. Oh, sure. Other things come between him asking and her killing him to try and make you forget that ultimately Palpatine is inexplicably defeated by giving him exactly what he wanted. But that's basically how it goes down. Get this, gang. She makes like she's going to strike him down with her lightsaber, but she senses that Ben Solo, he's now Ben, now that Han showed up and had a fatherly talk with him that consisted of nothing but phony platitudes and a winning smile. Kylo Ben is near and surrounded by Palpatine's goons, so she force transports her extra lightsaber to him so he can fight them, and pulls out her other lightsaber instead. I forget how they bullshit the rest of this. They cut to Kylo Ben killing the goons, then he runs into the throne room and stands beside Rey, and together they raise their lightsabers to kill Palpatine, which is exactly what he wants, so what are they gonna do? But then Abrams changes the game and stalls again. Palpatine senses that Rey and Kylo are a dyad, and so he drains their bodies of life force to completely restore himself. But like everything else in this movie, in true video game form, this draining of their life force has no real effect on them. Kylo gets up, and Palpatine lifts him with the Force and hurls him over the edge of the cliff. Adios, last of the Skywalkers. Then using his limitless power, Palpatine does exactly what was rumored in one of my videos. He shoots Force lightning into the sky and hits the entire Resistance fleet. It doesn't matter that they're hit, because a few minutes later it's like nothing happened, but just the same, they're hit, and it's the same story with Rey getting her life force drained. Rey, conveniently recharged, also gets up, having been rooted for by the Force ghosts who cheer her on and maybe merge with her or some shit like that, I don't know. So again, nothing has consequences. Rey stands and repels Palpatine's lightning attack with her lightsaber. Then Force transports Kylo's lightsaber, forms an X with the two lightsabers, which makes Count Palpatine flinch because the undead don't like crosses, and so alone with just an extra lightsaber, the amazing Wonder Rey, the bestest ever, kills Palpatine just as he wanted her to do. So Palpatine wins, right? Well, I guess not, because he doesn't possess her and rule 1,000 years or anything, but nothing that happens in this movie matters at all. Rey dies, but Kylo, the very Kylo who got his life force drained earlier and then thrown off a cliff, crawls back up and brings Rey back to life, draining his life force to save her, and he dies. But then she doesn't drain her life force to bring him back, so sorry, Reylos. I guess Kylo loved her more than she loved him, so I guess he beat her for once. Well, nobody's perfect. And just what is it with this relationship between Kylo and Rey? For God's sakes, what does Rey see in him? This is a guy who she saw murder his own father. He went ahead and grabbed her and tortured her. He has decimated the galaxy. He tried to kill his own mother. And all of a sudden, he's the best boy for me. When she comes back to life, she kisses him, and then he dies. And not only does he die, but then he fades away like Yoda, which is really kind of an advanced Force kind of maneuver. Obi-Wan faded away when he got killed. Yoda faded away. Qui-Gon didn't fade away. Apparently Kylo is also the bestest ever, having kissed her. Redemption and all that. So basically at the end, this movie should be called The Rise of Palpatine because this film represents the complete and total annihilation of the Skywalker bloodline and the ascendance of the Palpatines. Consider, at the end, when Rey says, "I am Rey Skywalker." Rey has flown to Tatooine on Han's Millennium Falcon with Luke and Leia's lightsabers that she buries in the ground, and now she stands there at the end, having taken Luke's lightsaber, Luke's moisture farm, Luke's homestead, and Luke's family name, and she stands there having taken literally everything Luke has, watching Luke's sunset. From where I'm standing, that looks like a win for the Palpatines, and for Whammon, everywhere. The Rise of Skywalker being both the best and the worst of the Disney sequel trilogy movies is insidious. If it were not for the fact that it completely undermines the original trilogy and has the balls to retcon George Lucas's classic trilogy, we would not be discussing this movie. It would be a somewhat bad, fairly genial, little fun holiday movie that wouldn't disturb anyone. As it is, this thing is like the final death rattle of the Star Wars franchise before it goes off into the great force beyond. This thing is a monstrosity when you get right down to it. Flailing around desperately for many reasons. It could be that the script was bad. It could be that they were hamstrung by Ruin Johnson. There's a number of different explanations, but bringing Palpatine back is devastating to Star Wars. And the way that they have gone ahead and retconned Force Ghosts completely ruins Star Wars as a franchise. But that's J.J. Abrams in a nutshell, isn't it? Seemingly harmless work of good popcorn fun that destroys everything it touches. I have a lot more to say about this movie. I've just scratched the surface, but I'll talk more about it tonight at 6 o'clock on my live stream, as well as in future video reviews. But suffice it to say, for a fan of that galaxy far, far away, the rise of Palpatine is the fall of Star Wars. From the center of the earth, this is Dictor Van Doomcock bidding you all, my friends, stay angry.
Ha 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 ha.